He dragged a leg into the courtroom, a performance of pain so convincing that even the judge looked at him with pity. But what the judge already knew, hidden beneath the desk, was a remote control. And with a single click, he didn't just expose a lie. He exposed the corrupt mindset of the heretics, the ones we, ideologically, confront. This is the story of a man who believed he could deceive the system, but completely underestimated the power of a single video file. The sound of a limp is distinct. It's a heavy, uneven rhythm that speaks of pain with every second step. It's a sound that demands sympathy, that tells a story of suffering without a single word. Now imagine that same sound echoing through the polished halls of a courtroom. A man, let's call him David, walks to the witness stand, his body a monument to his alleged agony. Every head turns slightly. The jury watches. The judge takes note. It's a performance designed to be undeniable. This is the opening act of a play staged in bad faith, a deliberate manipulation of a system built as a safety net. This is the world of those who turn victimhood into a weapon for personal gain, who corrupt a structure built on trust, and in doing so, steal from every honest payer who faithfully contributes to it, driving up costs and feeding cynicism. The story doesn't begin in the courtroom, but in a vast warehouse. It's a place of concrete floors, towering shelves, and the steady, pulsing rhythm of logistics. On what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday, that rhythm was broken. David was, by his own account, moving a pallet of goods when his foot caught on a loose strap. The incident report would later describe a dramatic twist, a fall onto the hard floor, and an immediate burning pain in his lower back and leg. Co-workers rushed to help him. He was lifted to his feet, grimacing, barely able to put weight on his right leg. The scene was chaotic, genuine in the moment, a snapshot of a workplace accident. The shift manager filled out the initial report. Paramedics were called. He was taken for evaluation. The machinery of workers' compensation was set in motion by what appeared to be a clear and unfortunate event. But in the world of insurance fraud, the initial incident is often the least important part of the story. It's the spark, not the fire. The real narrative is woven in the days and weeks that follow, in the quiet spaces between official statements and medical appointments. It's there that truth and lies begin to drift apart. So what was David's life supposedly like after the fall? According to medical reports and his own sworn testimony during deposition, it was a life of deep limitation. He described constant, radiating pain that made sleep impossible. He claimed he could no longer play with his children in the yard. Simple tasks, taking out the trash, carrying groceries from the car, were portrayed as Herculean efforts, often requiring his wife's assistance. His doctor, relying solely on David's subjective reports of pain and the absence of contradicting evidence, documented significant functional limitations and inability to engage in any substantial gainful activity. The picture painted was that of a man broken by a single moment of misfortune, his vitality stolen, his future forever dimmed. But a curated reality is fragile. It cannot withstand an objective, unflinching gaze. And that's the central question, isn't it? How do you prove a feeling? How do you quantify pain? The system often relies on the claimant's word, and for the honest payer, that should be enough. But what happens when that word is a carefully constructed lie? This is the abyss fraudsters exploit. They bet on the system's inherent trust. They bet that their performance will be more convincing than any circumstantial doubt. They build a character, the wounded, helpless victim, and play the role with relentless dedication. In David's case, the performance was convincing enough that the claim was initially approved. The insurance company began to pay. The money started to flow. For a moment, it must have seemed that the plan was working perfectly. The staged fall was paying dividends. But in every complex investigation, there's always a moment. A single thread that, when pulled, begins to unravel the entire fabric. That thread is often a person who simply asks, "Why doesn't this add up?" That person was Sarah Jenkins, a senior claims adjuster with over 15 years of experience. She had seen everything, from genuine tragedies to clumsy attempts at deception. David's case landed on her desk during a routine audit. On the surface, it was clean. The incident report was filed. The medical records were consistent with his claims. But something felt off. It was a collection of small, almost insignificant red flags. The timing of the incident, right before a long weekend. The specific nature of the injury, a soft tissue issue, notoriously hard to dispute. A slight inconsistency between his statement and a co-worker's about the exact location of the fall. This wasn't evidence. It was a gut feeling, an intuition. But in Sarah's line of work, intuition is a professional duty. It's the starting gun for the truth. She didn't say he was lying. She simply said, "Show me the footage." She wasn't talking about the inside of the warehouse. That corridor had no camera coverage. She was thinking bigger, wider. Where else does a person go before and after work? Where do they let their guard down, believing they're unseen? Her request was the first gavel drop in this case, a quiet, administrative sound that set the entire process of exposure in motion. The hunt for the CCTV receipts had begun. "Hey, this story's stirring up some outrage on your side of the screen, isn't it? If it is, do me a crucial favor. Comment which state you're watching from, and tell me the exact moment that made your blood boil the most in this case. That way, I'll know you're truly connected to our mission, exposing these fraudsters and bringing justice to light." And listen to this. 96.3% of the people following these investigations still aren't subscribed to the channel. If you're not part of that group, I'm inviting you to subscribe right now. It's completely free, and you'll keep getting the most explosive stories of fraudsters being exposed straight to your feed. Also, remember, at the end of this video, you'll find even more shocking cases waiting for you on your screen. The claim landed with the weight of a formal document, a stack of papers that translated human suffering, or the performance of it, into cold, hard numbers. This was no longer just an incident report. It was a legal and financial demand. The fraud files were officially open. David's attorney, operating on a contingency basis, submitted a comprehensive packet that detailed not just the alleged injury, but its projected lifelong impact. The demand was staggering. Coverage for all past and future medical treatments, including speculative spinal injections and even potential surgery. Compensation for lost wages calculated until a theoretical retirement age, and a significant lump sum for permanent partial disability. The total figure easily soared into the high six-figure range, a life-changing amount of money predicated on a single, unwitnessed moment in a warehouse aisle. For the insurance carrier, this was no longer a simple claim. It was a major financial threat. The pressure to settle, to close a costly case and avoid the even greater expense of a trial, began to mount. This is the crucible where many fraudulent claims succeed, not through brilliance, but through the sheer, grinding economics of the system. But yielding to that pressure is what the Herages count on. They bet on the path of least resistance. But Sarah Jenkins was not inclined to yield. The red flags she had sensed were now codified in the claim's own language. The medical reports, while using the language of injury, were curiously devoid of objective evidence. They relied heavily on patient-reported pain levels and subjective complaints. There were no clear MRI findings, no neurological deficits a doctor could physically pinpoint. It was a house of cards built on David's own descriptions. Furthermore, the timeline was aggressive. The claim for permanent disability was filed with surprising speed, as if the conclusion of a ruined life was a foregone conclusion. This wasn't the cautious, wait-and-see approach typical of most legitimate long-term injury cases. This was a sprint to a payout. Sarah's mandate was clear. Proof before hype. She needed to shift the burden of proof from the insurer, who was expected to disprove the claim, back onto David to test the solidity of his story. She authorized an independent medical examination, IME. She also greenlit the first phase of surveillance. The goal was simple: to observe David in his natural habitat, away from the doctor's office and the lawyer's conference room. Would the man who couldn't carry a bag of groceries be able to mow his lawn? Would the man who needed help to stand from a chair be able to load heavy items into his car? The IME was a critical piece of the puzzle. A doctor, paid by the insurance company but bound by professional ethics, conducted a thorough physical examination. The report came back inconclusive, which in this context was a victory for the truth. The doctor noted inconsistencies in presentation and pain behaviors that were not consistent with the alleged pathophysiology. In plain English, David was exaggerating. He groaned when touched in areas unrelated to the injury. He moved with a dramatic limp in the exam room, but was observed sitting comfortably with a normal posture in the waiting room. The doctor could not find any objective, physical basis for the level of disability David claimed. This was the first major crack in the facade. It wasn't proof of fraud yet, but it was a powerful, professional opinion that the story didn't add up medically. It gave Sarah the ammunition she needed to deny the more speculative parts of the claim, like the future surgeries, and to dig deeper. The case code was now officially a high-priority investigation. Meanwhile, the surveillance team began their work. They parked down the street from David's house in a nondescript van. They followed him on his errands. For the first few days, the footage was exactly what you'd expect from a severely injured man. He moved slowly. He used the handrail carefully when descending his front steps. He drove to physical therapy appointments and sat in the waiting room, often seen grimacing as he stood up. It was a masterclass in consistency, but surveillance is a game of patience. It operates on the principle that no one can maintain a lie 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Everyone has a moment of forgetfulness, a second where they believe they are truly alone and unobserved. The investigators were waiting for that one unguarded moment. They were waiting for David to forget he was supposed to be disabled. And then it happened. Not at his house, not at a medical appointment, but in a place he likely never gave a second thought: the grocery store parking lot. The investigator, reviewing the footage from a long-range lens, saw something that made him pause and rewind. There it was. A flicker of normalcy. A brief 5-second window where David, after putting groceries in his trunk, turned and walked briskly back to return the shopping cart. There was no limp, no hesitation, just a normal, fluid gait. It was a small thing, but in the world of investigation, it was a seismic event. It was the CCTV receipt they had been praying for. This single piece of footage was not enough to take to court, but it was the key that unlocked everything. It proved that David's physical capability was far greater than he claimed. It justified expanding the surveillance budget. It shifted the entire mindset of the investigation from, "Is he lying?" to "How extensive is the lie?" Sarah now knew, with certainty, that they were dealing with a staged fall. The performance had a crack, and she was going to widen it until the whole thing shattered. The next phase would be to capture this duality, not just in a fleeting moment, but in a sustained, undeniable narrative. They needed to film him, engaging in activities that were directly contradictory to his sworn testimony. The hunt for the definitive case-ending footage was on. The gavel drop of the IME and the parking lot tape was just a prelude to the main event. The brief 5-second clip of a normal gait in a grocery store parking lot was the crack in the dam. For Sarah Jenkins and the investigation team, it transformed a vague suspicion into a tangible, visible truth. This was no longer about hunches or inconsistent medical reports. It was about a man being captured in a moment of pure, unguarded reality. The directive from that point forward was simple and relentless. Find more. The goal was to build an irrefutable catalog of evidence, a verdict real in the making that would prove David's physical capabilities beyond any shadow of a doubt. This phase of the investigation, the meticulous gathering of CCTV receipts and surveillance footage, is the backbone of any successful insurance fraud case. It's the slow, painstaking process of allowing the subject to bury themselves with their own actions, of letting the lie play out until it collapses under its own weight. The team now knew what to look for. They weren't just filming a man. They were documenting a performance, waiting for the actor to break character. The investigation widened its scope. It wasn't just about following David to his medical appointments anymore. It was about understanding his weekly routine, his hobbies, his social life. Where did he go when he thought no one who mattered was watching? The team employed a multi-pronged approach. Traditional physical surveillance continued, with investigators working in shifts to maintain a constant, discreet watch. But the real breakthroughs often came from a more modern tool: the network of public and private cameras that blanket our modern world. Sarah formally requested footage from locations David frequented: the gas station where he filled his tank, the local hardware store, the gym his friend owned. This is where the investigation evolved from a simple stakeout into a digital manhunt, piecing together a timeline of a person's life from dozens of disparate video sources. Each request was a shot in the dark, but the parking lot clip had given them a roadmap. They were looking for specific, repeatable actions that directly contradicted his claims of a debilitating back and leg injury. And then, the gold mine. One of the investigators, reviewing a week's worth of shifts, noticed a pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, David would drive to a local community center. He wouldn't go in the main entrance. He would park in the far corner of the lot, near a secluded side door. For weeks, they had assumed it was another physical therapy appointment. His behavior in the parking lot always a convincing display of discomfort and limitation. But something was off. The sessions were too long, and he always carried a large, heavy-looking duffel bag. A public records request revealed the truth. The community center's basketball courts were reserved for a private men's league on those nights. The investigator's next move was crucial. He didn't just stay in the car. On the next league night, he managed to gain access to a janitorial closet that had a window overlooking the court. What he filmed there was the single most damning piece of evidence in the entire fraud files. The footage was crystal clear. There was David, not in a state of pathetic limitation, but in a state of vibrant, explosive athleticism. He was running full court, jumping for rebounds, pivoting sharply on his allegedly injured leg, and driving to the basket with clear, unhindered force. The duffel bag contained his basketball gear. The limp was nowhere to be seen. For over an hour, he played with the intensity and agility of a completely healthy man. This wasn't a fleeting 5-second lapse. This was a sustained, hour-long demonstration of physical prowess that made a mockery of his sworn testimony. Here was a man who claimed he could not play with his children, playing a high-impact sport with adults. Here was a man who described sitting as an ordeal, sprinting and jumping without a trace of pain. This was the CCTV exposes narrative in its most perfect form. The camera, an impartial observer, had captured the absolute and total contradiction of his claimed reality. But the investigation didn't stop there. Proof before hype. The team needed to cement this evidence into an unassailable timeline. They cross-referenced the basketball footage with his medical appointments. On one particularly brazen Tuesday, he had attended a physical therapy session at 4 p.m., where he was documented as needing assistance to get on and off the therapy table. By 7:30 p.m. that same evening, he was on the basketball court, sinking three-pointers. The dichotomy was almost comical. They gathered more mundane, but equally telling evidence. Footage of him loading multiple bags of concrete into his truck at the hardware store, washing his car with vigorous, bending and twisting motions, and even chasing his dog across a park. Each clip was another nail in the coffin of his credibility. Sarah and the legal team now had a mountain of visual evidence. They had the staged fall narrative, not just as a theory, but as a documented pattern of life. The quiet, administrative gavel drop of the initial investigation had given way to the thunderous visual crescendo of outright exposure. The case was no longer about denying a claim. It was about proving perjury and fraud. The courtroom reckonings phase was about to begin. The evidence was ready. The only thing left was to see the color drain from David's face when he realized the game was over. This is how the system is supposed to work. To see the full unedited footage, and the moment the judge delivers the verdict, stay with us until the end. This is CCTV Verdict. The transition from investigation to litigation is a gavel drop of a different kind. It's the moment the sterile, factual world of evidence collides with the theatrical, high-stakes arena of the courtroom. For Sarah Jenkins and the legal team, the mountain of footage they had compiled was more than just evidence. It was a narrative waiting to be weaponized. The case was no longer just David versus the insurance company, it was the truth versus the lie. The legal strategy was simple yet devastating. They would use David's own sworn words to trap him, and then use the CCTV receipts to spring that trap in open court. This section, from claim to conviction, details the meticulous legal chess game that turns video clips into a verdict. The first move was the deposition, a sworn, out-of-court testimony where David, under oath, would forever cement his fraudulent story into the official record. The deposition room is a place of quiet tension. It lacks the grandeur of a courtroom, but the stakes are just as high. Every word spoken is recorded by a stenographer and carries the full weight of the law. David arrived with his attorney, performing his now familiar role of the suffering victim. He moved slowly, settled into the chair with an audible sigh, and maintained a pained expression throughout. His attorney had prepped him well. For hours, the insurance company's lawyer led him through a meticulous recounting of his alleged injury and its catastrophic impact on his life. The questions were designed to be exhaustive and to lock him into a specific, detailed narrative. And is it fair to say, Mr. David, that you experience sharp, shooting pain in your right leg when you put your full weight on it? Yes, constantly. Could you describe your typical day for me? From waking up to going to bed? It's a struggle. I have to slide out of bed. My wife often has to help me put my socks on because I can't bend over without severe pain. I can't stand for more than 10 minutes without needing to sit down. I certainly can't run. The idea of running it's impossible for me.
Phew, you mentioned playing with your children. Can you do that anymore? No, I used to play catch with my son in the yard. Now I just watch from a chair. It breaks my heart. Are there any household chores you're able to perform? Very few. Taking out the trash is too heavy. Mowing the lawn is out of the question. I can't carry the laundry basket. My life. It's just a shadow of what it was. Each answer was a brick, carefully laid in the wall of his deception. He was specific, emotional, and utterly committed to the character he had created. He painted a picture of a man utterly defeated by his injury, a man whose physical world had shrunk to a few painful, cautious movements. His attorney likely felt confident. David was sticking to the script. But what they didn't know was that every denial, every claim of incapacity, was being meticulously logged by the opposing counsel. Each "I can't" was a target. Each "it's impossible" was a promise to be broken by the footage waiting in the wings. This was the crucial, strategic patience of the legal process. They allowed him to talk. They encouraged him to be detailed. They gave him all the rope he would need. Following the deposition, the insurance company's legal team formally filed a motion for summary judgment, or in the alternative, to present the evidence of fraud directly to the judge overseeing the case. The motion was accompanied by a devastating exhibit, a curated video compilation, the verdict reel. This reel was a work of art in its own right. It began with clips from David's deposition, his own voice, clear and solemn, describing his limitations. "I can't run." Then the screen would cut to the basketball footage, showing him sprinting. "I can't bend over without severe pain." Cut to him vigorously washing his car, bending and twisting with ease. "I can't carry heavy things." Cut to him loading bags of concrete into his truck. The video was synced, timed, and labeled with dates and locations, creating an irrefutable side-by-side comparison of his words versus his actions. This was the heart of the courtroom reckoning's narrative. It wasn't just about showing he was active, it was about showing he was a perjurer. He hadn't just lied on a form, he had lied under oath repeatedly and specifically. The fraud files were now a weapon, and they were aimed directly at the heart of his credibility. The stage was now set for the main event, the hearing. This would be the first time David and his legal team would see the full scope of the evidence against them. The insurance company's lawyers were prepared to call the investigators to the stand to authenticate the footage, to detail the timeline, and to present the CCTV expose's narrative in its full, damning context.
The goal was no longer just to defeat the financial claim. It was to demonstrate such a clear pattern of criminal fraud that the judge would have no choice but to refer the case for potential criminal prosecution for perjury and insurance fraud. The quiet parking lot footage had started this, but the legal process was about to amplify it into a roar that would echo far beyond that single courtroom, a warning to all who would attempt to game the system. The gavel down was imminent.
The air in the courtroom is always still, but on the day of the hearing, it felt thick enough to cut with a knife. This was the moment of courtroom reckonings. David entered, performing his part one last time, his gait a slow, measured performance of agony. He took his seat beside his attorney, who arranged a pillow behind his back. They believed they were there to argue the nuances of a back injury. They had no idea they were walking into a meticulously laid trap. The insurance company's legal team sat calmly, their case not built on argument, but on a digital pile of CCTV receipts that was about to come crashing down. The judge, a seasoned man with a weary expression, called the room to order. The first part of the hearing was procedural, but everyone could feel the tension building. Then it began. The insurer's lawyer stood and approached the bench. "Your Honor, before we proceed with the testimony, we would like to present a video exhibit that goes directly to the heart of the claimant's credibility. It demonstrates that his claimed injuries are not just exaggerated, but are a complete and total fabrication." This was the moment. The lights in the courtroom dimmed slightly. A large screen flickered to life. The first thing heard was David's own voice, clean and clear from the deposition recording. The idea of running is, "It's impossible for me." Gavel drop. A beat of silence. Then the screen erupted with the footage of him on the basketball court, sprinting, jumping, pivoting, a portrait of vibrant health. The contrast was so jarring, so absolute, that a collective, sharp intake of breath was heard in the courtroom. David visibly flinched. His attorney stiffened, his pen freezing above his legal pad. The video compilation, the verdict reel, continued its methodical, devastating work. Clip after clip, his sworn testimony was paired with the visual proof of its falsehood. "I can't carry heavy things." There he was, hefting bags of concrete. "I need help with simple chores." There he was, mowing his lawn with ease. The video was a sledgehammer, bludgeoning his credibility into dust. This was not a cross-examination. It was an execution. The judge's face was an unreadable mask for the first minute. But as the video played on, a subtle shift occurred. The initial neutrality gave way to a focused intensity. His eyes narrowed slightly as he absorbed the blatant contradictions. And then, during a particularly damning segment showing David chasing his dog across a park immediately after a physical therapy appointment, the judge did something extraordinary. A faint, dry smile touched his lips. It wasn't a smile of amusement, but one of cold, clear recognition. It was the smile of a man who had seen every trick in the book and was now seeing a particularly brazen one unravel in the most definitive way possible. He saw the staged fall for what it was. He saw the heresies, the ideology of deceit, being exposed in his courtroom. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving the screen, his fingers steepled under his chin. The performance was over. The truth was on display, and it was undeniable. When the screen finally went dark and the lights came up, the silence was deafening. The judge didn't need to hear another word. He looked directly at David's attorney, his voice low and measured, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Counselor," he began, "I have seen many attempts to mislead this court, but rarely have I seen such a comprehensive and visual demonstration of perjury." He then turned his gaze to David, who had shrunk in his seat, the color drained from his face. The man who had limped all the way to court now looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The judge's next words were the final gavel drop. The claim for workers' compensation benefits is denied in its entirety. Furthermore, the court finds clear and convincing evidence of a deliberate scheme to defraud. I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution for insurance fraud and perjury. The banging of the actual gavel was a formality. The real verdict had been delivered the moment the judge smiled at the parking lot footage. Proof before hype. The fraud files were now closed, with a resounding final thud of justice. The bang of the gavel in the courtroom was not an end, but a beginning. It was the starter's pistol for the fallout, the cascade of consequences that follows when a fabricated reality is dismantled by objective truth. For David, the immediate loss of his financial claim was just the first domino to fall. The judge's referral to the district attorney turned the case from a civil dispute into a criminal matter. The very same CCTV receipts and the verdict reel that secured the dismissal of his claim now became the cornerstone of a criminal prosecution for insurance fraud and perjury. The district attorney's office, armed with a judge's recommendation and a mountain of video evidence, filed charges swiftly. The man who had pretended he could barely walk was now facing the very real prospect of walking into a prison cell. The financial repercussions were immediate and severe. David was now liable for the insurance company's entire cost of the investigation and legal defense, a sum that ran into the tens of thousands of dollars. He was ordered to repay every cent of the temporary disability benefits he had received during the pendency of his claim. The staged fall had not only failed to yield a payout, it had plunged him into significant debt. But the financial pain was perhaps the most manageable part of the fallout. The criminal charges carried the weight of the state. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, his defense attorney had little room to maneuver. A plea bargain was negotiated. David pleaded guilty to one count of felony insurance fraud to avoid a trial and a potentially longer sentence. The gavel drop in criminal court was even heavier. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and was forced to pay an additional $15,000 in criminal fines. He became a convicted felon, a status that would haunt him for life, creating barriers to employment, housing, and voting rights. But the fallout extends beyond the individual. This is a core tenet of workers' comp myths, the lie that fraud is a victimless crime. David's case is a textbook example of why that is a dangerous fallacy. The immense cost of his investigation, the surveillance teams, the legal hours, the IME, was not absorbed by some faceless corporation. It was factored into the insurance carrier's loss ratios, which in turn directly impacts the premiums paid by every other business in the state. The honest payer, the small business owner struggling to make payroll, the startup trying to provide for its employees, they are the ones who ultimately bear the cost of this deception. David's fraud was a tax on honesty, a drain on a system designed to protect genuine victims of workplace accidents. His actions contributed to the very climate of skepticism that can make it harder for legitimately injured workers to have their claims processed with the speed and trust they deserve. The personal devastation was equally comprehensive. The story, once confined to court documents, became a matter of public record. Local news outlets sometimes pick up these cases as cautionary tales. His name was now associated with fraud. The social stigma was immense. Relationships with friends and family were irreparably damaged by the revelation of his elaborate, long-term deception. The man who claimed he couldn't play with his children had been caught playing basketball for months. The breach of trust was total. He lost not just his money and his clean record, but also his reputation and the respect of his community. The fraud files were no longer just a case number. They were the story of his life, a public and permanent testament to his poor judgment. The herages, those who ideologically attack the system, often fail to calculate this personal toll, the complete unraveling of a life built on a lie. This case, like so many we expose, serves as a powerful deterrent and a critical educational tool. It dismantles the myth of the easy score and reveals the multi-layered fallout that awaits those who attempt it. The system, when functioning as intended, is not just a payer of claims, but a defender of its own integrity. It has mechanisms to identify, investigate, and punish those who would see it as a target for exploitation. The journey from claim to conviction is a difficult one, but as the parking lot footage proves, it is a journey that truth, with a little technological help, is destined to win. The CCTV exposes narrative is complete, but its echo serves as a warning to others. So, what is the real cost of a lie? It's not just the six-figure claim, or the legal fees. It's the corrosive distrust it sows into a system built on a principle of mutual protection. It's the higher premiums extracted from the honest payer, the business owner who plays by the rules. It's the raised eyebrow and the heightened scrutiny that every future legitimate claimant must now face because of the actions of the few. The hereges, quem, ideologicamente atacamos, are not just individuals. They are carriers of a mindset that says, the rules don't apply to me. This system is a piggy bank to be broken. And that is an ideology that must be, and will be, attacked with every tool at our disposal. This is the true mission of this channel. It's not about schadenfreude or the simple pleasure of seeing a liar caught. It's about restoration. It's about demonstrating that the architecture of justice, while sometimes slow, is incredibly sturdy. That for every stage fall, there is a CCTV receipt waiting in the wings. For every fabricated narrative, there is a verdict reel being compiled in silence. The parking lot footage, the grocery store clip, the basketball game, they are more than just evidence. They are the unblinking eyes of truth, the modern-day guarantors of accountability. They are the promise that, in the end, the performance will always end, and reality will have its final say. Let this case be a lesson. Let the image of the judge's faint, knowing smile be etched into your memory. That smile was not just for David. It was for every would-be fraudster watching, for every person who thinks they can beat the system. It was a smile that said, "We see you." The gavel drop is not just a sound. It is an echo that travels through courtrooms, through insurance offices, and into the lives of those who believe their lies are safe. It is the sound of a balance being restored. So the next time you hear a story that seems too perfect, too tragic, too convenient, remember this case. Remember that in a world saturated with spin, there is still one immutable truth. Proof before hype. The camera doesn't lie, and neither does the consequences.